Did you think you have to give up your favorite meals because of diabetes? Think again. I used to avoid carbohydrate-heavy foods like rice, pasta, or even fruit, worrying they would spike my blood sugar. But as I learned more about my body and how it responds to different foods, I realized that I can enjoy almost anything if I can make the right choices. In this video, I'll share the surprising truth about some of the most notorious no-no items in the diabetes diet, like bread, fast food, or alcohol. And I'll show you how I enjoy them without sending my blood sugar through the roof. I'll also reveal my go-to diabetes-friendly items so that you can enjoy them too if you'd like. So without further ado, let's talk about bread. I tested 20 most popular types of bread and how much they spike blood sugar to help you decide which ones you should eat and which ones you should avoid if you live with diabetes. Here are the 20 breads we're gonna talk about today. We have white bread, whole wheat bread, sourdough bread, keto bread, and much more. Now, a lot of people, including many healthcare professionals, will tell you that if you have diabetes, you have to stay away from bread completely to be able to keep your blood sugar under control. I don't agree with that at all. Most of the people who say that don't even have diabetes. They don't have the first-hand real-life experience. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, and this is by no means medical advice, but I lived with diabetes for 35 years. I ate every type of bread out there many times, and after eating it, I tested my blood sugar with a glucose meter. I know exactly what each type of bread does with my blood sugar. Now, here are 3 simple rules I follow to make sure that I always choose the right bread for me and for my blood sugar. Rule number 1, I choose a bread that is low in carbs because carbs spike my blood sugar. Rule number 2, I choose a bread that is high in fiber because I know that fiber slows down digestion and slows down any blood sugar spikes. Any bread with carb to fiber ratio around 5 or lower is a good bread for me. And rule number 3, I choose a bread that has 0 or very little sugar because sugar is what spikes my blood glucose the fastest. That's not what we want. But let's look at all the bread types I have here and talk about a few more tips you can follow to pick the right bread for yourself. Let's start with white bread. Traditional white bread is made of flour, yeast, water, sugar, oil, and salt. These ingredients don't sound very healthy, do they? When we look at the label, we see that this white bread has 49 carbs and 2 grams of fiber per 100 grams. That's a carb to fiber ratio of 21, a lot more than 5. Plus, it has 5 grams of sugar. And that's why I automatically avoid any kind of white bread. I just don't eat it. Next is brown bread. Most people believe that brown bread is healthier and therefore better for diabetics than white bread. But it really depends how your brown bread is made and what the exact ingredients are. If the brown color is only achieved by molasses and the bread is high in sugar, it can be just as bad, if not worse, as a traditional white bread. On the other hand, if the brown bread is made with a good amount of whole grain flour, it can be more diabetes friendly than a traditional white bread. So you need to look at the label. We see that this particular brown bread has 46 carbs, 4 grams of fiber, and 3 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That's better than the traditional white bread we looked at before. But the carb to fiber ratio is at 11, which is still way too high for me. It would spike my blood sugar way too fast. Remember, I aim for carb to fiber ratio of around 5 or lower. In emergency situations, I would accept something between 5 and 8, but nothing more than that. And that's why I would definitely avoid this brown bread. Next on the list is whole wheat bread. Whole wheat bread is generally a better option for diabetics than normal bread. It's because whole wheat bread is made of fully intact wheat grains, which have not been stripped out of fiber, and that's very good. But again, it's not that simple. The food companies know how to trick you. They often make whole wheat bread and add lots of sugar in it to make it taste good. We don't want any added sugar. So again, we need to look at the label. This particular whole wheat bread has 44 carbs and 6 grams of fiber. That's a carb to fiber ratio of 7, which is something I would be fine with if there was no other choice. But there is a problem with this bread, and that's the added sugar. 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Although this bread is probably better than the previous 2 we looked at, it would still spike my blood sugar quite fast because of the added sugar. So stay away from this, find a better whole wheat bread. Next up we have multigrain bread. Multigrain bread is a type of bread prepared with 2 or more types of grain. These can include barley, flax, millet, oats, whole wheat flour, and any others. The fact that the bread is multigrain doesn't really tell us much, unless we know what types of grain were used. What we're looking for here is kinds of grain that were not refined and they are rich in fiber. Now, from my experience, most multigrain breads tend to be a better choice than a traditional white or brown bread. But oftentimes the word multigrain is just another marketing trick of the big food industry. The word multigrain makes our brain think that this must be something healthy, but it doesn't actually say anything about how heavily these grains are processed. Multigrain doesn't mean whole grain, and that's a big difference. When we go and look at the labels, we will see that most multigrain breads are not that great. This one, for example, has 48 carbs, 5 grams of fiber. That's carb to fiber ratio of 9, and that's too high for me. It shows us that these grains definitely have been processed to some extent. But the good thing is that this bread doesn't have a lot of sugar. Only 1.5 grams per 100 grams. That's not too bad. But still, this particular bread will probably spike my blood sugar very similar to the whole wheat bread we just looked at and in the previous example. And so I would probably stay away from it. Next we have whole grain bread. Like whole wheat bread, whole grain bread is made up of fully intact grains. This can include barley, brown rice, oats, and others, not only wheat. All of these are rich in fiber, vitamins, and minerals. In general, whole grain bread is usually one of the most blood sugar friendly options you can find in an average store. This on the screen is a bread that I buy sometimes here in Switzerland. It's an organic whole grain bread. This one in particular has 40 carbs and 10 grams of fiber. That's a carb to fiber ratio of 4. That's perfect. Finally, we have something below 5. This one also only has 1.5 grams of sugar, so all the values here are in check. And based on my personal experience, this bread spikes blood sugar very gently and very slowly compared to all the other breads we talked about before. So I approve of this one. A little side note before we go to the next bread. If you haven't noticed it so far, there are thousands of brands that sell bread in a store or on the internet. You can find a whole grain bread just like this one that I showed in the previous example. It's perfect. And you can also find a whole grain bread from another brand with tons of added sugar, which will spike your blood sugar a lot more. That's why I always look at the back label with the actual nutritional values. Next 5 types of bread on my list are baguette, brioche or croissant, ciabatta, focaccia, and cornbread. We can put all these types of bread in one basket, and I will be done with this basket very quickly, because this basket you should not touch. These breads are even worse than white bread. They have absolutely no fiber, they have a lot of added sugar, and they will spike your blood sugar to the moon. It's not food. It's garbage. Now, number 10 on my list is sourdough bread. And this is where it's getting more interesting for diabetics. Because sourdough bread is made through a slow fermentation process, which may cause this type of bread to raise blood sugar more slowly than other breads. That's why sourdough bread can be a great option for diabetics if done right. The fermentation process results in the formation of acetic acid, which is the same ingredient that you can find in apple cider vinegar. And if you watched my previous videos, you might know that acetic acid has a beneficial effect on blood glucose levels. Specifically, it does reduce blood sugar spikes after meals with carbohydrates. Now, not all sourdough breads are created equal. So again, we need to look at the label. This particular sourdough has 51 carbs and only 2 grams of fiber. That's carb to fiber ratio of 23. And our goal is 5. So is this sourdough good or bad for our blood sugar? Well, it will probably be better than white bread if their nutritional labels look the same otherwise. But with this specific sourdough, the fermentation process and the acetic acid will not save us. There is just not enough fiber in this bread, and so it will send our blood sugar up very fast. Stay away from this sourdough. We need to look for one with more fiber and less sugar. Next bread I want to show you is pumpernickel bread. This one is prepared with rye flour and yeast, and it uses sourdough as the main ingredient. Pumpernickel bread has 5 times more fiber than a typical bread, which is great and exactly what we're looking for. And because it has sourdough in it, Pumpernickel also contains acetic acid, which we already know will further reduce blood sugar spikes after eating pumpernickel bread. That all sounds amazing. So let's look at the real life example, let's look at the label and my real life experience with pumpernickel. This particular one has 47 carbs and 7 grams of fiber. That's a carb to fiber ratio of 7. That's a bit higher than what I would like to see, but in this case I would actually be fine with it because this bread has only 0.5 grams of sugar. And I actually had extremely good experience with pumpernickel bread when I lived in the US. It worked extremely well and my blood sugar was not spiking that much after eating it. The truth is that this bread has a very specific robust taste, so some people might not like it, but I personally do. So if you haven't tried pumpernickel bread yet, give it a shot. I approve it. Moving on to Ezekiel bread. This is a type of whole grain bread that gets its name from an ancient formula found in the Bible. It's made from sprouted whole grains like wheat, millet, barley and spelt, and legumes like beans, soybeans or lentils. These are all awesome ingredients, plus it doesn't contain any refined flour or sugar. Look at that. This particular Ezekiel bread has 44 carbs, 8 grams of fiber, that's a carb to fiber ratio of 4.5, and it has literally 0 sugar. This is perfect bread. I personally found Ezekiel bread one of the best options for my blood sugars. It works extremely well for me. It has a very slow glycemic response. The blood sugar is spiking very gently and very slowly after eating Ezekiel bread, plus it's full of healthy vitamins and minerals. So I definitely approve this one. Now again, Ezekiel bread has a specific taste and texture. It's a nutty sweet taste and sort of dense, chewy texture. You might not love it when you eat it for the first time, but I personally really like it. By the way, if you get the Ezekiel bread or any other sprouted bread, be prepared that it goes bad very quickly. You might need to eat it fast, keep it in the fridge or even in the freezer if you want to store it for more than a couple days. Actually, if your bread doesn't last long in room temperature, it's usually a good bread. It's like a rule of thumb. Now I still have 7 more types of bread to get to, and some of them are really amazing, but before I do that, I want to remind you that if you want to chat with me one-on-one, or if you want to support me financially, there are 2 ways you can do that. The first option is booking a coaching session with me. You can book 45 or 90 minutes at this link here. The second option is much more affordable. It's my Patreon. When you go to patreon.com/type1talks and sign up, you get access not only to me, but also to all my bonus content. And there are only 17 spots still available in my Patreon VIP group. Don't miss out, because once these are taken, you won't be able to join the OG VIP group ever again. Next on the list is rye bread. Rye bread is made with flour from rye grain. Rye grain is rich in various nutrients and has a lower glycemic index than wheat, for example. So rye bread is definitely an interesting option for diabetics. Now there are different kinds of rye bread. Some of them good, some of them bad. So as always, we need to look at the label. This particular rye bread has 48 carbs, 6 grams of fiber. That's a carb to fiber ratio of 8, which is a bit higher than what I would like to see. Another problem with this specific rye bread is that it has almost 4 grams of sugar. So I would stay away from this one. But in general, rye bread is always a viable option for me. If I can't find anything better, I would go for it. There are different versions and you might be able to find a whole grain rye bread with more fiber and less sugar than this particular one, and that will be more blood sugar friendly. Next 2 types of bread on my list are pita bread and naan bread. Most of the time these are heavily processed, very high in carbs and very low in fiber. Plus they are often used with all kinds of meals that are unhealthy in general and problematic for blood sugar control. So I personally would stay very far from both pita bread and naan bread, although I love Indian cuisine. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against these breads, nothing in personal, I just don't think they are particularly good for blood sugar control in their traditional form. But the next 2 types of bread on my list are more interesting. Keto bread and protein bread. And I put these 2 together because I see the term protein bread used more in Europe and the term keto bread used more in the US. But oftentimes these tend to be very similar, if not the same thing. Keto bread is definitely a valid option for diabetics because a true keto bread is very low in carbs and it doesn't contain the heavy grains that make traditional bread so carby. Instead, they usually use ingredients like almond flour, coconut flour, psyllium, eggs, or even cream cheese. I definitely noticed that when I eat true keto bread, my blood sugar will almost not spike at all, especially in the short run. This keto bread has 11 carbs and 8 grams of fiber per slice. This is a carb to fiber ratio of less than 2. It also has 4 grams of protein and no added sugar, so it looks very good. And this bread will definitely not spike my blood sugar. But when picking keto bread or protein bread, we need to be careful. They are low in carbs, but they might be very high in fat and calories in general. So if you're trying to lose weight, keto bread might not always be the best option. Plus, in my personal case, really makes my insulin sensitivity worse. I become more insulin resistant if I eat high-fat meals. And also, many keto breads might include many artificial ingredients that might not be so great for you. So again, always look at the ingredients list and look at the label. We still have 2 more types of bread on my list, and these are flax and chia breads. These are both very good options for diabetics because both flax and chia seeds are an excellent source of fiber while being very low in calories. Now, these breads usually have other ingredients than chia seeds and flax seeds as well, so we need to pay attention to what these ingredients are. This particular organic flax and chia bread has 30 carbs, 11 grams of fiber, and that's a carb to fiber ratio of less than 3, which is excellent. On the other hand, it has almost 3 grams of sugar. Still, I do approve of this specific bread because I find these values are quite balanced, and from my experience, the blood sugar spike from this kind of bread is not that bad. Now again, we need to be careful and we need to watch out for marketing tricks because there are chia and flax breads which are basically made of 100% white refined flour with a few chia seeds or flax seeds on top, thrown on top of the bread, which is nothing like what we are looking at here. These values would be completely different, and this bread is basically just white bread, so watch out for that. We really must be always looking for bread with low glycemic index, carb to fiber ratio of no more than 8 but ideally 5, and as little sugar as possible. And that way our blood sugar after eating bread will not be that high. Now, we talked a lot about bread, but what about alcohol? I was wondering whether drinking alcohol is really that bad for someone living with diabetes, or whether having a drink or 2 at a party is actually okay. So over the past couple months, I tried the most popular alcoholic drinks, and after each of them I tested my blood sugar to see if it spiked too high or dropped too low. And what I discovered was the most important lesson about alcohol and diabetes that you will ever come across. So in this video, I'm going to show you if it's okay to drink alcohol if you're someone living with diabetes, how you can drink alcohol safely without doing too much damage to your body, and what's the best drink that will keep your blood sugar under control. And by the way, I'm also going to share with you a story about a night when alcohol almost killed me. First alcoholic drink I decided to test was beer. The reason why I chose beer was simple. I come from the Czech Republic, and Czechs are known to drink the most beer per capita in the world. But is it okay to drink beer for a diabetic? Well, the most iconic Czech lager beer doesn't have that much alcohol, only 4.4% by volume. But a small glass of this lager also has about 145 calories and 17 carbs, which is quite a lot. When I tested my blood sugar after drinking this beer, I saw the glucose spiking to around 200 within 45 minutes of drinking it, a lot higher than what I would like to see. And that's why I don't think beer is the best option for people living with diabetes. But the interesting thing is that the reason why most beers spike blood sugar very fast is not the alcohol, it's the high carb content of the beer. So if you can't live without it, try looking for a more blood sugar friendly beer with less carbs. Corona Premier, Budweiser Select, or Miller Lite might be good options. Look what my blood sugar did after I drank Corona Premier. The spike is very mild, a lot less compared to a traditional beer. Unfortunately, with all these light beers, you need to compromise on taste a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide what's more important, whether it's the taste of the beer or your blood sugar levels. Now, don't get me wrong, I do drink a normal beer from time to time too. Whenever I do that, I usually give myself a little bit of insulin before I start drinking that beer to cover those carbs in the beer and to avoid that blood sugar spike. And this approach works really well for me. But another thing you need to keep in mind is that it's not only about the carbs. The alcohol in the beer impacts our blood sugar too. And I'm going to show you how a bit later in this video. Next, I want to talk about the second alcoholic drink I decided to test during my experiment: wine. Now, wine is a popular choice amongst many of my friends who live with diabetes because unlike beer, wine tends to have a lower carbohydrate content. But wine also has higher alcohol content by volume. So is it really better than beer? Let's break it out. An average wine you can buy in most stores and restaurants has somewhere between 11 and 14% of alcohol. But the range can get much wider with some fortified wines, reaching the alcohol content of up to 20%. Now, a typical glass of dry wine will have somewhere between 1 and 2 grams of carbs, which is very low, almost negligible, and about 100 to 130 calories. When I tested both white and red dry wine, my blood sugar after drinking a glass didn't spike at all. Even after a second glass, the blood sugar was still flat for the next couple hours. That's why I think that dry wine is really blood sugar friendly, and it seems to be a good option for people living with diabetes. But we have to keep in mind that not all wines are created equal. A glass of sweet wine like dessert wine or sweet sparkling wine can easily have around 15 carbs and 160 calories. That's about as much as a small beer. Here you can clearly see the difference between a glass of dry red wine and a glass of sweet sparkling wine. My blood sugar spiked close to 200 after drinking the sweet wine, and that's not what I like to see. So always make sure that you know what kind of wine you're drinking. I try to stick to dry wines and not drink too much of it. But how much is too much, you might be asking? Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I'm sure that when you saw the title of this video, the best alcohol for diabetes, some of you were thinking, well, that's clear. The best alcohol for diabetes is no alcohol. So, is it actually okay to drink alcohol? Well, according to the American Diabetes Association, drinking a moderate amount of alcohol regularly may have a positive impact on cardiovascular health and lower your HbA1c. They approve of 1 drink per day for women and 2 drinks per day for men. So they seem to allow diabetics to drink daily. But is that the right thing to do? Well, I'm not so sure. See, back in 2005, I was a young man living with type 1 diabetes. I was using an insulin pump and I was supposed to prick my finger and check my blood sugar about 10 times per day. But let me be honest with you, what I really wanted to do back then was explore the world, run after girls, and go out and have drinks. And it didn't take very long and I found my 21-year-old self at a party drinking beers and shots of whiskey one after another. I probably drank like 5 beers and 5 shots of whiskey that night. And I was having fun. But the next thing I remember is an ambulance taking me to hospital. I caused myself an alcohol-induced ketoacidosis and I spent 36 hours in an ICU. And to be honest with you, I feel ashamed to this day when I think of that night. I can hardly imagine the amount of anxiety and embarrassment that my parents must have been through. Now, what I'm trying to say with this story is we need to realize that alcohol plays an important social role in our society. It's really hard to completely avoid it and not make any mistakes. If you're not drinking any alcohol and it works for you, it's perfectly okay. I didn't make this video to encourage you to start drinking. But if you do drink alcohol, try to keep it in moderation. Don't go too crazy, because I don't want you to have to go through what I had to go through on that night when I ended up in a hospital. Now let's talk a bit more about the drink that played a major role in my previous story, whiskey. Or you know what, let's talk about spirits in general, because when you live with diabetes, it doesn't really matter if you drink whiskey, bourbon, vodka, gin, or even tequila. During my experiment, I tried them all, and I can confirm that they have very similar effects on both my blood sugar and the way I feel after drinking them. Spirits typically have around 40% alcohol by volume and slightly over 100 calories per shot. So they're not really that helpful when you're trying to lose weight, but at the same time, they have 0 carbohydrates. You heard me right, 0 carbs. I tested them all and my blood sugar stayed pretty much flat after drinking them, as long as I didn't mix them with other things. So they might not be healthy, but they are blood sugar friendly. But most people like to include spirits in cocktails and mixed drinks, and that's why I decided to test a few of those to see what they will do to my blood sugar. The most popular cocktail in the world is margarita. This drink is made of tequila, lime juice and triple sec, which is a sweet orange flavored liqueur. An average margarita has about 250 calories and 15 grams of carbs, and that's probably why my blood sugar spiked quickly to around 180 milligrams per deciliter within about 30 minutes of drinking it. So margarita is not the best drink for someone trying to avoid high blood sugars. Another super popular cocktail I tried was mojito. This one is made of white rum, lime, mint leaves, club soda, and sugar syrup. An average mojito has about 220 calories and 13 carbs, coming mostly from the sugar syrup. So it's no surprise that my blood sugar after drinking it spiked about as fast as after drinking margarita. So mojito is also not a good option for someone trying to avoid those steep blood sugar spikes. Now the third popular cocktail I tried was Cosmopolitan. This one is made of vodka, cranberry juice, and Cointreau, which again is another sweet orange flavored liqueur. But the thing is, an average Cosmo is a lot more sour than margarita or mojito. It has only 7 carbs, which is not too bad. When I looked at my CGM after drinking Cosmo, I could see that my blood sugar spiked, but not anywhere as much as with traditional mojito or margarita. So Cosmopolitan might be something to consider if you're in the market for a classic blood sugar friendly cocktail. But when it comes to mixed drinks, I have to admit that my real guilty pleasure is Aperol Spritz. This drink is made of Aperol liqueur, Prosecco, and soda water. With 200 calories and 18 carbs per average glass of Aperol, it's a quite calorie and carb heavy drink. And that's why it's no surprise that my blood sugar spiked quickly to over 200 within about 30 minutes of drinking it. Definitely not a blood sugar friendly option. I will still drink it from time to time though, but when I do, I usually give myself a little insulin to cover those carbs in Aperol Spritz before I start drinking it, to avoid that steep blood sugar spike. Now it's becoming clearer and clearer from this experiment that it's not the alcohol that raises blood glucose. It's the carbs, the sugar syrups, and the sweet liqueurs in some of these mixed drinks that make my blood sugar shoot up and make things a lot more challenging for me. But don't worry, I'm gonna share a few more blood sugar friendly cocktails as well as my absolute favorite drink that doesn't spike my blood sugar a bit later in this video. Now before I do that, I need to share another story with you. You see, on that night when I ended up in hospital, I clearly drank way too much beer, and that's why my blood sugar spiked to over 400. I also drank way too much whiskey and alcohol in general, which led to vomiting, dehydration, and caused diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. Since that happened to me, I really tried to drink alcohol in moderation and not overdo it, because DKA is a major risk factor. But there is another big concern I have with alcoholic drinks, and another risk which is even more common when you are a diabetic. Remember the chart I was showing you of what my blood sugar does after drinking beer, wine, or whiskey? Well, I only showed you the first part of it, but I didn't tell you the whole story. The thing is, when we're drinking alcoholic beverages, the initial blood sugar spike caused by the carbohydrates in the drink is not the only thing we need to worry about. There is one more thing that happens to our blood sugar several hours after we drink that alcohol. A few years after my first alcohol incident, I already knew I should not drink too much, but I still enjoyed having a few drinks now and then. And one night I wanted to go play soccer with friends. I didn't have enough time to eat dinner, but I was already late, so I didn't think too much of it, and I just left for the soccer game. Everything went well, and after the game we went for a few drinks. And I didn't want to drink beer because I knew it would spike my blood sugar, so I just had 2 or 3 whiskeys on the rocks. At this point it was all good, and by the time I got home I was super tired and I went straight to bed. But the next thing I remember was waking up in the middle of the night all confused. I couldn't quite figure out where I was. My blood sugar must have been super low because I was feeling extremely sick and extremely weak. But I didn't have enough energy in me to make myself get up and eat or drink something sweet to bring my blood sugar up. I just couldn't move. I was basically paralyzed, lying on my bed, feeling sick and not being able to move or think clearly. The only thing I managed to do using literally all the energy I had in me was wake up my girlfriend at the time who was sleeping next to me. I managed to say only a few words to her, but I remembered these words until today. I'm sick. Help me. I'm sick. I was repeating that over and over again. She managed to bring me a couple of juice boxes, and luckily this helped me recover. But my blood sugar during that night was as low as 38 milligrams per deciliter, which is extremely low and very dangerous. She literally saved my life by bringing me those juice boxes that I could drink. Now the reason why I'm sharing this story is that what caused that severe low blood sugar event most likely was the alcohol that I drank the night before. And to confirm this theory, I ran an experiment. I compared my blood sugar during nights when I didn't drink any alcohol and during nights after drinking. Here you can see how my average blood sugar graph looked on those nights without alcohol. And here you can see how it looks on those nights with alcohol. We can clearly tell that alcohol starts bringing my blood sugar down in the middle of the night and the drop continues into early morning. The thing is, there is one organ in our body that is programmed to protect us from these kinds of low blood sugar events. It's liver. Whenever our blood sugar starts dropping too low, the liver starts releasing glucose to bring the blood sugar back to a safe zone. But when the liver is too busy with breaking down alcohol, it doesn't have enough capacity to produce glucose and bring blood sugar up. And that's why my blood sugar not only didn't spike that night, it did the exact opposite. It dropped really low. It was a combination of the alcohol, the physical activity, and the fact that I didn't eat any dinner that made that night really scary. And what I learned from this is that whenever I drink alcohol, I need to make sure I don't skip meals. I also need to reduce my basal insulin dose during the night after drinking to avoid those scary blood sugar drops. But I promised you that I would share my top 3 blood sugar friendly drinks with you. So here they are. Starting with number 3. You can have this one in almost every bar. It's really refreshing and has practically zero carbs. It's sugar-free mojito. Just ask the waiter or waitress to not add any sugar or any sugar syrup. They'll know what you mean. Now, some of you might like the no sugar version of mojito, but the problem many of you might have is that the drink will now be too sour. Luckily, there is an easy way to fix it. Just ask for a sweetener. Almost every restaurant or a bar has one. So add the sweetener in your mojito. And you can really do this with any cocktail that uses sugary syrup. So it also works for drinks like Old Fashioned, Long Island iced tea, or Mai Tai. By the way, here you can see what my blood sugar did after a glass of sugar-free mojito. Literally no blood sugar spike, the line is practically flat. Now, of course, sweeteners are not the healthiest thing ever, especially not the generic ones they have in most bars. But you can always bring your own. My favorite is probably stevia, which offers a reasonable balance between an acceptable taste, sweetness, and healthiness, if that's even a word. Now, moving on to my favorite drink number 2. If you watch some of my previous videos, you might know that I really like Scotch whiskey. Now, most whiskey drinkers will tell you that you should drink whiskey neat, but to be honest, I also find it quite nice to pour the whiskey over several ice cubes and to mix it with some club soda to create a blood sugar friendly cocktail. This simple drink has no added sugar, no carbs, and only about 105 calories. Look at the graph. Whiskey and soda doesn't spike my blood sugar at all. The only thing I need to worry about is a potential drop in my blood glucose a few hours later. But if you don't like whiskey, you could try to do the same thing with a spirit of your choice. Just mix it with ice cubes and soda and see if you like it. Now, before I reveal my number 1 drink, I need to touch on something super important when it comes to diabetes and alcohol. The goal I have with this YouTube channel is for everyone who is watching to live a full life with diabetes while achieving balanced blood sugar and lower HbA1c. But I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should drink alcohol. That's really up to you to decide. I'm just here to share my experience and provide you with some practical strategies so that you can make an occasional drink or two part of your life if you want to, and so that you can make it safely and don't make the same mistakes I made. By the way, I'm currently developing a dedicated group coaching program, the Blood Sugar Academy. And I'm really excited because this program will be here to help you manage your blood sugar at challenging real-life situations, like having a drink or two at a party might be. My goal is to launch the Blood Sugar Academy later this year for the first 10 to 20 people. So if you want to be part of the first group, just click the link below and register your interest. And I will be sure to share more information with you once the program is launched. But here is my number 1 alcoholic drink that I drink most often. Again, you can get this one at every bar and make it in so many variations. As you know, I've been known for my Diet Coke addiction, and that's why my favorite alcoholic drink can be no other than whiskey and Coke. I know it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but I just think it tastes great and it doesn't mess with my blood sugar. As long as I don't drink too many of them, I will be fine. Look at my blood sugar graph after drinking whiskey with Diet Coke. It's perfectly flatline. If you don't like whiskey, you can replace it with any other spirit, and if you don't want to drink Diet Coke, you can replace it with any other diet soda. So now you know about my whiskey and Diet Coke addiction, let's turn the page and talk about fast food. Because quite honestly, it's been challenging to find blood sugar friendly fast food items for me. Let me tell you more. Ever since I was diagnosed with diabetes, I've been on a mission to find the perfect fast food meal. One that won't spike my blood sugar through the roof but still tastes amazing. Unlike this side salad from McDonald's. Sure, it only has 18 calories, but it tastes like grass. Throughout my life, I tried hundreds of fast food options and almost gave up, because 99% of the fast food meals I tried would send my blood sugar on a roller coaster. But 35 years after my diagnosis, I finally found what I was looking for. This customized Chipotle burrito bowl is my #1 go-to option anytime I'm in the US. So in this video, I'm gonna share with you what exactly I put in this bowl, what blood sugar friendly meals I found in the other most popular fast food restaurants. And last but not least, my 3 tips on how you can eat pretty much any fast food meal without worrying about your blood sugar spiking too much. Let's address the elephant in the room first, because I'm sure some of you might be thinking, well, the best fast food for diabetes is no fast food, right? And I agree with you. In an ideal world, we would all cook our meals at home from whole foods ingredients. And our blood sugar would always be in the optimal range, between 70 and 140 milligrams per deciliter. But that's not the world we live in. Some of us are busy, some of us can't cook, and some of us, like me, simply enjoy going out with friends from time to time and not be the only weirdo who doesn't order a pizza. Now, please don't get me wrong, a healthy lifestyle and a balanced blood sugar is my #1 priority. But I also want to be able to fully enjoy my life, and that includes eating out sometimes. I don't do it every day, but I don't mind doing it because I have a strategy for it. Starting with tip #1, know exactly what you are eating. Now, to better explain this tip, I will show you what exactly happened to my blood sugar after consuming the 2 most popular fast food items in the world. Big Mac from McDonald's and a caramel macchiato from Starbucks. Let's have a look, it's really interesting. I started my test with caramel macchiato, which is a very carbohydrate heavy drink. More than half of its calories come from carbs, 57% to be exact. Plus, most of these carbs are pure sugar. There is some protein and fat as well, but no fiber. And that's why when you drink caramel macchiato at Starbucks, your blood sugar will most likely go up very quickly. If you live with some form of diabetes, you can easily spike to over 200 or even 300 milligrams per deciliter within less than an hour. Now, Big Mac is a completely different animal. When we look at its nutritional composition, we'll see that almost half of the calories in a Big Mac come from fat. But there are a lot of calories from carbs too. Now, all those fats slow down absorption of glucose from the carbs into the bloodstream, and that's why when you eat a Big Mac, your blood sugar probably won't go up that fast, but it might end up at similarly high levels a few hours after you eat it. Now let's compare these results to my burrito bowl from Chipotle. As you can see, my custom bowl includes chicken, half portion of brown rice, black or pinto beans, fresh tomato salsa, fajita vegetables, and lettuce. This all is real food, no artificial ingredients. And looking at its nutritional composition, we can see a clear difference between the burrito bowl, caramel macchiato, and the Big Mac. A lot more calories in this bowl come from protein and fiber, which is a good thing. After eating this bowl, your glucose spike will most likely be relatively mild and your blood sugar should come back to normal levels in a few hours. Now, it doesn't really matter if you live with type 2 diabetes, type 1 like me, or any other form of diabetes. A fast food burger or a sugary caffeinated drink are not the easiest items on the menu when it comes to managing your blood sugar. But before I show you some better options to choose from in McDonald's and Starbucks, I really need you to pay attention, because I'm about to draw the most important chart in the history of diabetes. It shows how and when different components of your meal impact your blood sugar. Pure carbs raise blood sugar very fast, typically within an hour or 2. Proteins have less impact on the blood sugar than carbs, and they do raise blood sugar a bit later, typically about 2 to 4 hours after you eat it. And fats might impact your blood sugar for up to 6 to 8 hours after you eat them. And that's why high carb and high fat meal like the Big Mac, like a pizza, are the most challenging ones to handle. Now, one component of your meal that's often left out from this chart is fiber, which technically is included in the carb count, but fiber doesn't really spike blood sugar, so fiber-rich meals are always a good option. Now, of course, that chart is a little bit simplified because pretty much any meal you will get will include a combination of carbs, protein, fat and fiber. But the thing is, all fast food chains have the nutritional value of their meals available on their website and in the restaurant. So please look these things up, because knowing exactly what you are eating will allow you to come up with a strong blood sugar strategy for pretty much any fast food meal. And I will share my strategy plus some other fast food blood sugar hacks in a minute. But first, I promised you some blood sugar friendly alternatives in McDonald's and Starbucks. So here they are. The grilled chicken salad will raise your blood sugar much less than a Big Mac, and the rise in your blood sugar will be more manageable. It's because more than half of the calories in the salad come from protein, and the salad also has a decent amount of fiber. In Starbucks, you could go for black coffee with almond milk, which should only have a couple grams of carbs and not more than 20 calories, which is perfect. But keep in mind that although there are no carbs in a coffee, there is caffeine. Caffeine stimulates release of adrenaline, and adrenaline can also cause a temporary spike in your blood sugar. Now, moving on to tip number 2, be intentional when choosing your meal. The thing is, I don't really eat fast food very often because I know that it's not the best fuel for my brain and for my body. On the other hand, I will absolutely have a huge slice of pizza or even a Big Mac menu from time to time, and I don't blame myself for it because I do have a strategy for those meals and I can keep my blood sugar below 150 milligrams per deciliter most of the time. But whenever I find myself ordering fast food for lunch, it's important for me to pause and think about how I want to feel after I eat this. See, maybe I have an important work task to get done or an important work meeting to attend. Maybe I want to stay sharp to be able to focus on this task, not feel tired and distracted by having to manage my blood sugar after this carb and fat heavy meal. In that case, I might want to intentionally decide to go for something healthier and lighter that will fuel me better and that will be more gentle to my blood sugars. Here are a few real-life examples to help you understand what I mean. This is what happened with my blood sugar after I ate a fried chicken sandwich at Chick-fil-A, which is quite high in both carbs and trans fats. And here is what happened after I ate a grilled chicken sandwich. As you can see, the fried chicken kept my blood sugar elevated for a lot longer, and I spent way more time and mental energy keeping my blood sugar under control. So when it comes to meat, grilled seems to be a better option than fried. Okay, but what about wraps and bowls? Are they better than sandwiches? To find it out, I headed to Subway, where I ate on 3 different days. I ordered the exact same thing: roasted chicken with Swiss cheese, all the vegetables, and vinaigrette sauce. Once as a sandwich, once as a wrap, and once as a bowl. After eating the sandwich, I saw a notable spike in my blood sugar, which is exactly what I expected, given I did not give myself insulin in advance of that meal. After eating the wrap, the spike was even bigger, so it seems that the wrap is not a better option than a sandwich. And it makes sense because, looking at the wrap, I saw that it does have more carbs than the bread. On the last day, I ordered a salad bowl with the exact same ingredients. And as you can see, my glucose stayed almost flat. So a bowl is definitely a winner, at least in Subway. It's way easier to manage when it comes to my blood sugar. But please keep in mind, this was a salad bowl, not a rice bowl. If that was a rice bowl, then it would probably spike my blood sugar a lot more. But guys and girls, I want to make one thing clear. If you decide to order a sandwich or a wrap, it's totally okay, I don't judge you. And one little thing you can do to make those more blood sugar friendly is to go for a whole wheat or whole grain option whenever that kind of thing is available. Next, let's talk about side dishes. And the most popular side dish in the world is the French fries from McDonald's. So I headed there again because it wouldn't be a complete video without me testing them. After eating a regular portion of French fries, which includes 43 carbs and 15 grams of fat, with a very little protein and fiber of course, I saw a notable spike in my blood sugar, although I took insulin with this meal. You can see that the blood sugar stayed elevated for several hours before it came back down. Next, I decided to compare the fries to mashed potatoes from KFC, which I have to admit are really tasty. These mashed potatoes have only 23 carbs and 5 grams of fat, so not as much as the French fries from McDonald's. And as you can see, after taking my insulin and eating the mashed potatoes, my blood sugar didn't rise so high. It was a bit easier to manage. The main reason why mashed potatoes seem to be better option is that they have more protein, and the standard portion seems to be lower in calories than French fries. It's just a smaller meal, smaller portion in general. But as a third side dish, I decided to try something different. My favorite side dish in Chipotle, and it's the guacamole. I went to the Chipotle website and ordered a big portion, which has even more calories than fries. But as you can see, it's loaded with healthy fats and fiber, which makes the calories in avocado very blood sugar friendly. Although I didn't take any insulin for that guacamole, I didn't see my blood sugar spiking at all. It started creeping up slowly after 2 hours, but the overall rise in my glucose was minimal. Another two blood sugar friendly side dishes that you can order in many fast food places are side salad or steamed vegetables. These barely have any net carbs, so they probably won't spike your blood sugar as long as you pick the right dressing for the salad. The most popular salad dressing options are ranch, Thousand Islands and blue cheese, but those are very high in saturated fats and might even include some sugar. I usually stay away from those because I noticed that those, although they have no carbs, still mess up with my post-meal blood sugar quite a bit. The dressings I prefer are Italian or balsamic vinaigrette because they are much more blood sugar friendly. But be careful because some of those might include honey or even some added sugar, which if you are insulin dependent like me, you might need to consider when calculating your pre-meal dose. Okay, but what about sauces? Do they impact blood sugar as well? Of course they do. I tried a few of them and what they do to my blood sugar if I don't take any insulin. First was ketchup, which is indeed a very popular choice, but it contains quite a bit of sugar. 3 small packets of ketchup raised my blood sugar by 30 milligrams per deciliter in less than an hour. And just like ketchup, any other sauce that has this sweet taste, like barbecue sauce or sweet and sour, will spike my blood sugar quite fast. I just know it. But next I wanted to show you what mayonnaise does, since it has no sugar, but it's loaded with fat. Mayo didn't spike my blood sugar as fast as ketchup, but after consuming the same amount of mayonnaise, my blood sugar stayed elevated for a few hours. And I could see a very similar effect with other sauces that are high in fat, like the cheese sauce at Taco Bell or zesty sauce in Burger King. As you can see, high sugar or high saturated fat content in pretty much any sauce is not ideal. And that's why my go-to choices are hot sauce and mustard. These hardly ever impact my blood sugar at all, because they tend to have no or very little sugar and fat content. Alright, I have to take a break here because I just realized I'm giving you all these blood sugar friendly options, but I have to admit to something. I don't follow these healthy tips 100%. In fact, sometimes I don't follow them at all. There are days and occasions when I choose to not follow them because I simply want to enjoy the time with my friends or family. Sometimes I just want to hang out, eat the same things that they eat, and not worry about my blood sugar too much, alright? And that's why in those situations, it's perfectly fine for me to have a few giant slices of pizza, a big fat burger with fries, or a Chinese takeout. Now usually I don't blame myself for doing it because I developed these strategies and I know how to deal with those kinds of meals. And keeping my blood sugar between 70 and 140 or at least 180 most of those times. So whenever I go wild like that, I follow these 5 rules. Rule number 1, always order a veggie appetizer with it. I know that if I eat vegetables first, this will help reduce blood sugar spike from any other meals that I will eat later on. Rule number 2 is I keep moving after I eat a carby meal. If there is a chance to stand up and mingle or go for a walk or get involved in any kind of activity, be it with friends or their kids that are part of the group, I'll go for it. Any kind of aerobic physical activity will make me instantly more insulin sensitive, and that will help keep my blood sugar lower. Number 3, when I order a Chinese takeout that has a lot of white rice and some sweet sauce, I just know it will be full of fast-acting carbs. It will have a high glycemic index and it will spike my blood sugar very fast. Now, as you know, I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I have to inject insulin before pretty much any meal. But this actually is a good thing because I can take advantage of that insulin and time it properly to fight or counteract that fast blood sugar spike from the Chinese takeout. The simple way to do it is take that insulin ahead of the meal. And for a high glycemic index type of meal like this one, I can take the insulin even earlier than I'm used to with other meals. And in this specific instance, in my case, it can be up to 20 minutes before the meal. By the way, you can use exactly the same strategy for other carby meals like breakfast cereal or a fruit bowl. It works like charm for me. Rule number 4, when I eat pizza that not only has a lot of carbs, it also has a lot of fat, I know it will be acting very differently from that Chinese takeout. The spike in my glucose will be slower and my blood sugar might be going up for several hours after eating that pizza. But again, I can make use of my insulin to counteract that slower but longer blood sugar spike. The way I do it is I only take half of my insulin dose before the meal and the other half of the insulin about 90 minutes after eating that pizza. And again, you can use the very same strategy for many meals that are very high in fat and very high in carbs. Now, your body, the type of insulin you use, and your insulin needs might be different from mine. And that's why my next rule is probably the most important one on the list. But before we get to it, I need to tell you something very important. You know, I get a lot of offers from the companies in the diabetes space wanting me promote their products to you. They usually offer decent financial compensation, but most of the time I say no, because I want to keep this channel free from excessive advertising. But creating these videos is how I make my living, and that's why I'm so incredibly grateful to those of you who support me on Patreon. By joining the Patreon community, you get direct access to me, bonus content, invitations to virtual community meetups, and much more. Spots in the Patreon group are limited, so go ahead and join while you still can. Now, moving on to the most important tip of this whole video: the trial and error. You see, when I get adventurous and decide to try a new meal, oftentimes there is no way for me to know what exactly is in that meal. The first thing I do in those kinds of situations is to try to estimate the number of carbs that meal could have. Another thing I think about is this meal similar to something I already know, something I already have strategy for? Is it more like a Chinese takeout? Is it more like a pizza? Or is it more like a Chipotle bowl? I don't expect to get things 100% right for the first time, but I always take it as an opportunity to learn about how my body will react, how my blood sugar will react to that meal, and how I will feel after eating that meal. The easiest way to do it is to take a moment and look at my blood sugar graph on my CGM when I get home. And if things didn't go so well, think about what I can do differently next time with this specific type of meal. Should I eat less of it next time? Should I take more insulin? Should I take the insulin earlier? Is there anything I can improve? With diabetes, it's all about trial and error. So it's really beneficial for anyone who's trying to figure things out to get curious and just try and try again. I promise you that over the time you'll be able to figure out a strategy for pretty much any life situation, any meal, any activity, anything. But the thing is, even if you make the right food choices, controlling your blood sugar 24/7 can be a challenge. That's why I created a list with 30 so-called blood sugar hacks that I use to keep my blood sugar under control. I didn't cover them today, but if you want to know what they are, just click here and watch this video next. I guarantee you that these hacks will take your blood sugar control game to the next level. I'll see you in that video. Ciao.